Which Side Podcast is a proud member of the Which Side Media Collective.
This week, we don't have a sponsor. If you'd like to find out how you can sponsor an episode, just go to whichsidepodcast.com, click on the donate tab, and all the information you need is there.
You can reach thousands upon thousands of like-minded individuals. So go check it out. Sponsor an episode today. Can we sound any more addy?
We could. I don't want to.
This is episode 204.
Yeah, we talk with Eric Day of Vegan Movie.
I love this conversation. I love the idea of taking out and going and talking to longtime vegans about their experiences and not just the newly converted. So stay tuned for the episode. It's a really good conversation. Hey Jordan, what news and events do we have going on this week?
Well, being that I'm actually out of town right now in real life.
By out of town, you mean out of country.
Out of country. We're recording this early, so I don't have any events. So send some events this way.
Yeah, we'll push them out for you. For the Slingshot this week, October 9th, 1967. Come on, you gotta know this one.
October 9th,
yeah,
1967?
Uh-huh.
Oh, yeah.
You're gonna be like, oh, duh, I know this. That's when Che Guevara was murdered.
Duh, I know this.
If you like these little tidbits of history I pulled about the Slingshot personal organizer, go get your shit organized. You can pick one up at a local info shop or an online info shop like AK Press.
They don't pay us to do this. We just love them.
And we love you. So I hope you enjoy this episode.
It's funny, most of the stuff that I do, I try to keep it pretty low tech. But obviously, tech can be used for good and can be very effective in some areas. But yeah, like when I'm not working, I pretty much don't look at my phone as much as I can and don't sit behind a computer except for like the nonprofit work that I do. So yeah, it's sometimes hard to find that balance, but
So what brought you on that journey? Like, what brought you to activism and veganism in general?
I guess it started back in 2000. I guess really 1999. I was working at a tech company and met some friends that I just started hanging out with, and they happened to be vegan. They were also into the like vegan straight edge hardcore music scene. Mm-hmm. And then I started learning more about that. And in 2001, I wrote a paper for an English class I was taking at the time in college. And I did it on why you should be vegan, even though I wasn't even vegetarian myself when I started the paper. But by the time I finished the paper, I was vegan. I had, all the books I read and the research convinced me. And then about 6 years later, I think in 2007, I went to Portland Veg Fest after moving to Portland and was pretty inspired, and it seemed like a pretty cool community, and there's a big presence there. So my wife and I, she wasn't my wife at the time, but we were together, and we went and decided to get involved in the nonprofit, and I just started volunteering, and she actually ended up working for them and organizing the Veg Fest for a few years as well. And that's kind of where it began.
What were some of the books that really changed your mind that you were reading?
The two big ones back then that I remember reading was, it was written by Eric Marcus. And it had vegan in the title, but to be honest, I can't remember the exact title. but whatever his book was back in like 2000, whatever he wrote. And then also Diet for a New America by John Robbins.
I absolutely love hearing when people talk about Diet for New America. I feel like the current generation you never hear it anymore, really, right? But people in the mid 90s to early 2000s that really made the change. That was a hugely influential book.
Oh yeah, it doesn't, like you said, like it doesn't get as much attention today because there's so many books. But back then, like that was one of the few books, and it was kind of like at least for, I think it was more geared towards the health angle, of course, but it was kind of like the vegan Bible in a way in the 90s.
And I think the Eric Marcus book was Vegan, the New Ethics of Eating.
Yeah, that was it.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Again, two books you don't really hear very often. So what made you go write that paper to begin with? Was it, what caused that origin to go?
Just the influence from my friends over the 2 years previous to that. Like after I met them, I was always going out to dinner with them, and, they were vegan. So we would go to vegan places or, had vegan friendly food, and I was eating vegan, and, they were always they weren't trying to convince me or push it on me anyway, but they just were. So I thought, oh, I guess, I should at least look into this and see what it's all about. And, to be honest, I don't read that much, at least not actual paper books. Obviously I read a lot online, but, I use the requirement to write a research paper as an excuse to actually sit down and start reading some books. And at least that was back then. I read a lot more now, but back then like right out of high school, I wasn't much of a reader. So
did you find the hardcore scene influencing you as well at the time?
A little bit. I definitely got more into like the punk and hardcore music, just hanging out with them. And we even started our own like vegan straight edge band and everything. It was kind of fun for a while. But yeah, it was, I never like, really identified that much with it, but it definitely influenced me for sure.
Yeah, that was a really different time in the animal rights 2000s. A lot more, I'd say, more toxic masculinity and definitely more militancy.
Yeah, the whole like ALF and some of the more militant groups, and they still exist today, but I think it's less. You hear less about it, at least.
I wonder if some of that has to do with the change in focus from vivisection and fur to farming.
Probably. Yeah, I think as sort of the activists grew up, they realized like, oh, maybe, breaking the law and going to jail isn't always the most effective way, and sometimes it is. Some of the actions that people do, I definitely respect their commitment and, what they're willing to give up and what they're willing to do in the name of, liberating animals. But personally, that's not my form of activism. And I think a lot of people are finding it easier to take the more, I don't know how you put it, but you don't put as much at risk, but you can still be very effective. Mm-hmm. You can still get out there and do a lot of good by, handing out leaflets or organizing a veg fest, and you don't have to worry about going to jail at the end of the day. And that's a lot easier for people to do. So, and then of course, as time went on, people realized like, oh, well, vivisection, it's terrible and it shouldn't be done, but it's a drop in the bucket compared to, factory farming. So maybe we should put more effort there. And you can see that a lot of the big groups focus specifically on factory farming versus all the other ways that animals are exploited. And it's good that there's the diversity of all these groups working on everything. But, in terms of numbers, if you just look at if you want to make the most good that you can with a limited time and resources you have, it really makes sense to look at the farmed animals.
What's the biggest change that you've seen since then?
Since when? Exactly.
Since you first went vegan.
I was kind of in, at least for me personally, I was in sort of a little vegan bubble in Portland, Oregon. So I wasn't aware of some of the bigger campaigns that some of the bigger groups were working on, like across the country and even the world. So for me, it was just being exposed to like, oh, there's much more strategic things going on a much bigger landscape versus us just having potlucks and organizing like the Veg Fest, sort of just the local Portland community events. So I'm sure those things were going on when I wasn't aware of them, but that's something that I've opened my eyes to in the past couple of years, a lot more so.
What is something that you see happening right now with inside the animal rights movement that you just wish didn't happen? Like whether that is tactics being used or just general philosophies.
I would say, in terms of tactics, I don't think there's any that I would say I shouldn't exist. The movement is very diverse, and the type of people that are within it are very diverse, and the messaging that will reach people is even more diverse. So I don't think there's any one right or wrong way of doing it. There's the folks like at Direct Action Everywhere who are doing very visible protests. That while it might turn some away, it also is very impactful for some. Just like leafleting impacts some, but others won't bother reading. So I think having all forms of protesting is, whatever way people are inspired to do it. I think it's a good thing, as long as it is actually having a net benefit at the end of the day for enough people. The one thing that I really don't like to see, at least personally, is the infighting that happens of, people get very sort of dogmatic in their approach, and they're not willing to accept that, oh, maybe there's another way, or maybe there are 5 different ways that are all the right way, depending on who you're talking to and how you're presenting it. The big thing that comes to mind, of course, is the sort of the abolitionist versus the pragmatist, or whatever you want to call the other side. And it seems to be just fueling a lot of, hatred within the movement, and when you're already so small, fighting each other is obviously not useful in any way. So, agree to disagree and do your own thing, but don't spend the time, fighting with each other, because that's, at the end of the day, that's not going to help anything.
Yeah, we've talked to a couple of people recently, and they pointed out very similar things as well, especially the aspect of, as a larger community, when we have these type of discussions, it seems like there's almost zero understanding of nuance, right, behind the individual discussions.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know what the answer to that is, because you kind of hear it from both sides, right? You kind of hear people, like specifically like when you're talking about like abolitionists, you hear them talk about like, we got to get past this infighting, but then people on the other side kind of view the abolitionists as the aggressors, and vice versa, right?
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, it's not one-sided by any means. It comes from both sides for sure.
Yeah. I don't have the answer to that one, but I wish I didn't see it either.
Yeah, I think it's within any. As soon as you get more than one person involved in anything, there's always going to be disagreements and local minorities and whatnot. So, luckily there's a lot of people who just kind of understand that it's not useful to do that, and they just focus on what's important. So, hopefully, people will follow that lead.
Have you started local activism with your move to San Francisco, or the Bay Area, I should say?
Not really, to be honest, between work and family and just continuing to do movie, promotion. And we're going to be doing an impact analysis with like online surveys and other things. That sort of kept me busy enough that I don't get to have much other free time. I have met some new people down here, so it's been nice connecting with them. And actually, Veg News magazine is moving to Santa Cruz, and they're going to be right down the street from where we live, which will be kind of cool to have that little community moving down here. So
Oh,
yeah,
that'd
it'll
be
be
awesome.
fun to connect.
So getting to the movie, what really was the start of the movie? What really brought this to fruition?
We were sitting around, I think it was February of 2015, just sitting around the house. At that time, we had a newborn daughter. She was only like a month and a half old, and I was taking some time off of work, and like, oh, we should figure out some little project to do while we're, didn't have a lot of free time, but we had some free time, and we thought, oh, why don't we try making a documentary? It was kind of really that, that lighthearted when it started. We didn't think it was going to be a big deal. And we thought, oh yeah, we have a video camera. We can I know how to hit record on it. And, it pretty much started like that. And eventually, we put out some, made a post on, there's a Facebook group called the Portland Vegans. We made a post on there. And we're like, hey, anyone know how to make movies? Like, we're thinking about making a documentary. And someone responded like, hey, my husband makes movies. He worked in like Hollywood for 25 years. Now he has his own production company, and, you should talk to him. So I met up with him and told him our plan, which was basically the way you don't make movies of, just setting up a camera and hoping for the best. And, he helped bring this vision, and this is Glenn Scott Lacey, the director. And he ended up telling me how you actually do make movies and realistically what it would cost and all these things. And, we decided to just move forward and make it. And in terms of the idea, at first we thought, oh, let's make a documentary, but then, what would it be about? Because there's so many documentaries in the genre already. With Forks Over Knives sort of covered the health angle, and, a number of other health films were sort of covering that. Of course, Cowspiracy was, really took on the environmental angle. And, the other films like Vegucated and Speciesism, sort of had their own niches. But one thing that we didn't see yet was people who had been vegan for a long time and how they integrated it into their everyday lives. So it wasn't, okay, I'm going to go vegan for 30 days and look at, how people react, which is fun to watch. But that movie had been done. But we wanted to show, okay, well, what if you have kids and you've been vegan for like a decade? What does that look like? Maybe it's not the most interesting at times, but, maybe there's some really cool moments that we could capture. And we opened up our website about a month later after having the idea, and partnered with some of the nonprofits that helped us promote our call for stories. And we ended up having over 700 people write in to the website with their story of why they went vegan and, what they do, how they live their lives now. And for the most part, it's, they just buy something different at the grocery store, but, their story of how they got there, some of them were pretty amazing. So we narrowed it down to 4 feature stories and a handful of others, just to do some small shorts to mix in. And that's how it got started.
How was that process of narrowing down the stories?
It took a long time to read them all, and I think we probably narrowed it down to like 100 or so. And then we all sort of brought our list together. The director and my wife, Wendy, who's also one of the producers on the film, myself, we read them all, got together and said, okay, well, what are your top, 10? And we went through, and there were a few that, like Genesis story right from the start, we knew that she was something special. And then we went through all the others, and, we were trying to find a good mix of diversity and lifestyles. Obviously we have like the chef, an ultramarathon runner, an 8-year-old child, and of course the Texas farmer, which was also a very compelling story, because you don't hear Texas farmers going vegan very often. And we just tried to balance everything and try to find as much diversity in our selection as possible. So the hope is that even if you don't identify with half the people in the film, you might still really relate to 1 or 2 stories, and that would hopefully draw you into the movie.
So what was your one story that you really wanted but didn't make the cut?
There was this one woman who, there was actually two that were we were hoping to get, but they didn't end up not working out. One was a woman who worked within prisons, and she basically taught like healthy living classes to prisoners. And we thought that might be a very interesting take to see, okay, well, how do, people who are, sentenced in prison, how are they reacting to her, vegan message and exercising. I think she was also a yoga teacher for them. That might be a fun interaction to capture on film. So that was one story that we received that ended up not quite making the cut. And another was someone, he was a pastor in Mississippi, and I think he had lost 200 to 300 pounds and just turned his life around, at least health-wise. And now he's sort of leading I guess it's like a meetup group, so to speak, helping convert this little town in Mississippi, and primarily all religious, people from his congregation. And now he's hosting vegan potlucks and, showing them that there's another way of eating as well. And we thought that might be a very interesting story to capture.
What was the reason that either one of those didn't work out?
One didn't make. Originally, we were going to fly to Mississippi and do that, and we had, he was one of our top stories. He had a family of 4 or 5, I think, but I think he ended up having to move, and then with our production timeline, we just couldn't find a date to actually come out to be able to film them. That one, we ended up having to find another story. And then the prisoner, the woman, it was sort of our next one if something else fell through. But she was the 5th one out of the 4 stories that we picked. So
what was the most challenging part of actually making this documentary that you didn't think would be at all challenging?
To be honest, I had no expectations going into it because I've never made a documentary before or worked on films in any way, other than just making home movies of the kids. So it was all, I guess it was all a surprise, both in some things were easy and some things were hard. I remember spending a lot more time on email, I guess, than I was expecting, just trying to schedule things, or some of the celebrities that we tried to reach out to, that could take months to pin down a date or a time with some of those people. So,
yeah.
And of course, for every person, especially on the celebrity side that you see in the film, there was, 20 that said no or never responded. So there's a lot of unanswered emails that went out.
So how does the theme of the movie translate into your own life? Being married and having kids and being vegan for a long time, what does that look like for you? What's our story, or? Yeah. What's your story, and how would that be portrayed inside the movie? Because I know mine. I've been vegan for a little over 20 years. I have a 9-year-old daughter, but really, it's a pretty boring, normal life, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Someone actually mentioned to us, oh, well, why aren't you featuring your own family in the film? Well, that'd be kind of weird. I don't think I'd want to be in a film, especially one that we were making. At least not this film. It wasn't the right venue for that. But yeah, like you said, it's kind of boring. We just eat food and we buy some things that are different than most people at the grocery store. But besides that, it's not a big deal, so we don't have some, amazing story like Genesis, for example. Mm-hmm. She was 4 years old and convinced her whole family of 6 to not go vegan. That's a pretty cool story, and something that, I think really inspires people and empowers kids, who might have parents who are not willing to be open to those types of lifestyle changes. But for us, like my wife Wendy, she's been vegetarian since birth and vegan since she was like 5 years old. So she's never really known anything different. Mm-hmm. And then I felt like I was vegan for so long, one thing different. So when we had kids, it was like, well, yeah, of course they're going to be vegan, you know? Mm-hmm. So there wasn't that much interesting to capture, I guess.
I think for me being a vegan parent, the most surprising thing for me was how normal it is. Like I kind of went into it expecting arguments and fights and having to explain to people, and I've never experienced that yet.
You know how open-minded other relatives are. We've definitely got some questions, but it's never escalated into like arguments. But it was like, oh, so you know, are you gonna? Is your wife going to breastfeed your children? It's like, well, yeah, it's consent from an animal. You know, it's kind of how nature intended things. It's, you know, it's not like it's not cow's milk. It's human milk. So, you know, there's some funny conversations and questions like that, but people are like, oh, well, they're not vegan if they're drinking breast milk. It's like, well, you don't really quite get it, I guess. I grew up in Maine, so my hunting and fishing and very meat and potatoes type family. And I don't think they fully get it sometimes, but it's, they're not, I don't think they're judgmental or they disapprove of it or anything like that. They just, think we're kind of like the hippie family out in California to them. So
one of the things that me and my wife did right when we had our daughter was we sat down with our extended family and just made it clear, like, hey, this is the lifestyle, and if you want her in your life, you're going to have to appreciate that and respect that, and not give her things that aren't vegan. Like we can't trust you to be around her, then you can't be around her, kind of an ordeal. Did you find yourself ever having to do something similar?
No, because I see my family in Maine who we might have those types of issues with, which I don't think we would, but of all the family, it'd be my side because they're on board, or at least they're not vegan themselves, I should say. So it's never really been an issue. And then on my wife's side, her whole family's pretty much vegan, so that was easy.
That must be super nice. Those Thanksgivings must kick ass. Yeah,
it's nice. It's like, oh, well, there's no argument of like, oh, well, can we still have the turkey there or not? It's like, well, no, it's, we just invite all our friends over who are either vegan or very vegan friendly. And, the families, at least on the West Coast, we're all vegan. So it was easy. But yeah, if we ever went back to, it might be a bit more challenging. Yeah.
One of the most surprising things about raising a vegan kid for me so far was just this last year, my daughter complained that whenever she goes to like a birthday party, we always give her like a vegan cake or a vegan cupcake to take so she can, have it with them. And mm-hmm. she complained because this year we went to like our local vegan bakery and bought her a cupcake, and she took it, but she's like, I have the fancy one. Why do I have to have the fancy cupcake?
It's like, come on, just like take the rough it up a bit before I have to take it.
I'm like, the problems to have, right? Like, yeah, I wish that was my problem.
You see online where people say that the vegan parents are forcing their kids to be vegan, and then I guess you could make the same comment that people are forcing their kids to eat meat too. I just don't see that.
You're passing on culture.
Yeah.
Whatever the culture of the parents is, it's you're forcing that culture for, if they want to use that word, but really it's just so whether it's a religion or a diet or other lifestyle choice, it's all just culture. If cultures out there that are primarily vegan or 100% vegan, in some parts of the world, like, are they forcing their kids to be vegan, or is that just the way that everyone in that community lives? So it's not forced. So it's really just people not really understanding that it's not Yeah. It's not like you're forcing your kids to do drugs or something terrible like that.
So you started this project in your free time. Do you find that it took up more than just your free time?
Yep. It's been a full-time job and then some at points in the process. But, it's like activism or volunteering for projects, whether it be, well, now the movie, but before, with all the Veg Fest and other events in Portland, that was just sort of the second job that I feel like I've had for close to a decade now.
What kind of advice would you give to people who want to do similar endeavors?
Just dive in and start and ask for help, especially online. There's so many people out there doing, a variety of projects, and especially within the vegan community, there's so many people who seem to be eager to collaborate or to help out. We already sort of had our little filming team, but I think we had 3 or 4 other people who were interested in films or had made films previously that were like, hey, I can come help out if you ever need me on a shoot or do this or that. And I'm like, great. I don't know what we'd have you do, but it's cool to see all the support come out. So if you're trying to do something good within this community, there's just so much support. Just kind of dive in and ask for help, and you'll figure it out along the way. That's pretty much what we did.
So I'm sure that there's a ton of scenes that were in the film that you had to cut. Were there any that were more memorable that you wish that you could have kept in?
We definitely got a lot of the good ones in. Trying to think back. I know the answer is yeah. In the Moby interview, we interviewed him for about 45 minutes, and that could have been a documentary in itself, to be honest. Like he just said one amazing thing after another. Same thing with Neil Bernard. We had about an hour of footage from him covering every aspect of, sort of the health angles and the policy within government. And that could also be sort of its own little mini documentary. So those are 2 interviews that really stood out. We filmed for like 25 days. And there's just a mountain of footage that could have been used, we might actually still go back and use that, is to kind of keep the project going. Like, hey, here's the uncut interview from Neil Bernard. And, that might be really interesting to keep promoting the film through, sharing more content that we have. So, there was also another family that we filmed just for a day, or I guess really just an evening, and they were a really compelling family of I think 4, and some were like competing at a very high level within the racquetball community, and they were really fun to work with too. So that would have been a fun story to have gotten into. But once you get editing in the film, it's hard to squeeze everything in sometimes, especially if it doesn't quite make sense or there's not a good transition from another place.
Did you fly out to location, or did people come to your location?
We always went to their locations because we wanted to film obviously on the farm in Texas.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, stuff like that. Their everyday life was exactly, so we had to be, where they normally were. One of our stories was in Portland, so we weren't traveling for that. But we had Texas, Genesis was down in LA, and we had obviously some of the celebrity interviews down there. Mm-hmm. And we also went to Santa Rosa for the food truck venture out, that was not on the West Coast.
So one of the questions I've always wondered is, when it comes to these type of documentaries, what is usually the end goal? Like, is it just pure activism? Is there a gain for a specific organization? So, like, what is the actual end goal of this documentary?
I can't answer for, of course, all documentaries, in the genre, but for us, at the end of the day, it's just having an impact on, reducing animals being exploited for food primarily, into the effective altruism movement, at least, sort of using those philosophies within my own, activism, and doing the most good that you possibly can with the limited resources we have. And I wasn't as into it when we started this project. It's something sort of I've been reading a lot on and doing other work on the side. But I realized it kind of looks out that documentaries that tend to be very effective, and we're hoping that it will have the most impact, that we can. And obviously we want people who are not vegan or sort of on the edge, maybe thinking about going vegan, to see it more than anyone. Even though obviously most of the crowds that have seen it for the screenings, who are paying to come out are, primarily vegan, and they enjoy it. But of course they're there to hopefully go home and share it. And the other goal was to make it as accessible as possible. So, the people who are vegan, when they do see it, because, maybe it'll reinforce their own beliefs and choices of coworkers, their family, their friends who maybe aren't vegan yet. And getting that barrier to sort of entry, or to hitting that play button as low as possible. That was one of the primary goals. So, we just want people to see it and hopefully have an impact, and, at the end of the day, have impact for animals.
Being that you do provide it for free, how did you receive most of your funding?
The funding, my wife and I sort of seeded the project just to get things off the ground. And then we did basically a crowdfunding campaign through our own website, and relied on a lot of, donations to the community to help put it together. We did a couple small fundraising events, one in LA and one in Portland. Just got it all together somehow.
One of the things that I really loved about the film, and you kind of brought it up a little bit, was that it really just shows how living this lifestyle is all in all normal, right? Like these stories, there's a lot of amazing things that they're doing, but they're really just living normal lives with the subset of stories. And I really love that storytelling aspect of it.
Yeah, that was, if you look at the research that used to be, it's Faunalytics now, but the previous name. But anyways, if you go to Faunalytics, there's a published from, I think, 2 years ago now, that looked at the recidivism rate of people who go vegetarian or vegan and why they aren't anymore. And, one of the biggest reasons is social norms. They feel like they don't fit in, or they feel like it's just too difficult. And one of the main goals of this film is to show, you can look normal, so even if you are, you decide to go vegan, or you're thinking about going vegan, but maybe you're in the middle of nowhere in South Dakota, well, watch this movie and you see even people in Texas, maybe they're not all they're, they find a way to make it work because they, really believe in it. The other thing that came out of that study is that people who do it very quickly, they go vegan overnight, tend to go back. And also people who do it mainly for health and somewhat environmental tend to go back as well. But people who have a very strong animal ethic argument, or belief, I should say, in going vegan, they tend to stick a bit more. So obviously in the film, we've tended to focus a bit more on, the compassion for animals.
I think that's one of the areas that as a movement we've kind of failed on a little bit, is making sure that we don't lose so many, or when people do break away, I guess, I don't know a better terminology to use, but stop being vegan, that we're receptive to them coming back, right? That we're not so necessarily judgmental and allow people to quote unquote make mistakes, right?
Oh yeah, the ex-vegan haters, that's a strong presence online for sure.
I mean, and unfortunately in my youth, I was definitely one of them.
Yeah, me too.
If you don't know what's going on, it's easy to understand. But when you do know, and you've been vegan and you've had sort of, I don't want to say buy-in, but you've believed the reasons and enough to change your lifestyle, and then suddenly you decide not to, it is a bit harder to understand. It's how can you know things and then decide not to, as best I can, not to judge or shame or anything like that, especially not publicly in any way. But it's hard to understand. And especially when you're young and angry, it's an easy outlet for expressing that anger. But yeah, it's to do that type of, shaming or to show that anger, it's not helpful at the end of the day. If anything, you get them to come back to the other side. And I forget who it was that said it. It might have actually been during Moby's interview or someone's interview. They said, it's just as important to support people who are thinking about not being vegan anymore, recently are not vegan, just as much as it is to, find the new vegan. So, with the recidivism rate, just as much effort should be, to make sure people don't go back if they do go vegan, because that's really important.
So we've been talking about this movie this whole time, but how can people actually go and see the movie and pass it on to others?
You can go to veganmovie.org. The big video that's embedded right at the middle of the page will be the movie. That's the easiest way. And of course, if you have any devices, that stream from YouTube or Vimeo, you can just search those. That's probably hook up to your TV or whatnot. Our homepage, there's also a big list of screenings that have been organized pretty much independently of us. But making the movie for free, people can set up a screening and show it wherever they want. It's been at libraries, at theaters, people's living rooms, various meetup groups all around the world, and at Veg Fest and that sort of thing. So you might find a screening near you. And if you don't, you can always organize your own.
Well, thank you so much for talking with us.
Yeah, thank you for having me on. It's been fun.
So, I was just going to say, how can people get a hold of you? But I was going to say, that's probably just the website, right?
Oh, I think you're cutting out right now.
Oh, I was going to say, we usually end with how people can get a hold of you, but I'm just going to say that's probably the website, right?
Yeah, at veganmovie.org, there's a button for email, which is info@veganmovie.org. That goes directly to myself and my wife, who's the other producer on the film.
Well, thank you for being on. It was I really enjoyed the movie, and I can't wait to see what comes of it. I would love to see some of those extra interviews, particularly with Moby.
Yeah, me too. Well, as soon as and hopefully digging up some more things to share.
This week, you heard
Wet the Day by The Autumn Leaf.
Right now you're listening to
A Boat Beneath a Sunny Sky by Darshan, Ambient.
iTunes. Again, we're going to say this every single week. So just go help us out. Go help our SEO or search engine optimization results. So, whatever you listen to us on, go rate and review us there. iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play. Just go subscribe, rate, and review. It just helps out the show tremendously. And if you've already done that, then tell a friend. Tell all your friends.
Every time you see an online friend post, hey, what are some great podcasts I can listen to? Then all you have to do is say, Which Side Podcast is the best podcast in the world. I would recommend them with my life. I would give them my firstborn child, etc., etc. And, lie to them and let them know that they should listen to us. That's all that needs to be done.
Just lie for us. That's fine. All the time. Yeah, it was fucking amazing. It changed my life. That kind of stuff.
And while you're making up lies, you should also go and review us on iTunes. And you can use some of those lies in the comments.
We've asked people to troll us in the reviews, and still, no one's trolling us yet in there.
5 stars. These guys suck.
You would make my week.
And speaking of online friends, you should be our friend online. Find us on all of our social medias. Just go to whichsidepodcast.com, click on the social tab. We talk about things online that we don't talk about on the show. So, be our friend. Fuck shit, damn.
Which Side Podcast is hosted and produced by Jordan Halliday and Jeremy Parkin of the Which Side Media Collective. with web design by Jordan Halliday and sound design by Jeremy Parkin. Booking by Mari Halliday. Theme music by Commandantes. Go to wishsidecollective.org to check out the other shows in the collective. As always, fuck shit damn.